This has Giants fans absolutely fired up. In a time for teams that did not make the playoffs where not a lot going on besides other teams playing in the playoffs, that little lull between the regular season and free agency where there's a bit of a lack of excitement, the Giants have two players nominated for big-time awards that lights a bit of a fire under the fan base. One guy, his third nomination, the other, his first career nomination. We're going to break all of that down here on SF Giants Digest. Make sure to go down below and hit subscribe as we will be covering everything this offseason from the World Series winner to free agent signings, rumors, trades, the new manager. All of that will be covered here on SF Giants Digest, to make sure to go down and subscribe. Now, getting right into it, yesterday morning we learned some pretty exciting news from the Giants, MLB, and Rawlings. Here we find out that two Giants have been named as Gold Glove finalists. There you see in the top left corner our catcher, Patrick Bailey. This one was a shoo-in, no questions asked there. Pretty widely known as the best catcher in baseball defensively, and arguably the best defensive player in all of baseball, Patrick Bailey is known as. And then you go down in that bottom right-ish corner, you see Logan Webb's name there for the pitchers, and that is the more surprising one. When you look at the numbers, and we'll get into all of that, it is not as surprising, but for a guy like Logan Webb, you don't really pay attention to defensive numbers. For pitchers in general, you don't really pay attention to defensive numbers. So pretty exciting for a guy like Logan. You know, he probably takes pride in something like fielding his position, and it's something he hasn't been very good at previously, so good for him to step up and get nominated for this big-time award this season. Now, like I said, they were both named Gold Glove finalists. This is Justice De Los Santos, one of the beat writers for the Giants. He said Bailey's 31 fielding run value was the most in a single season since the stat started being recorded. We're going to get into that a little bit more here in a few minutes, but that is absolutely insane. That shows you just what level of defender Patrick Bailey truly is. And then he goes on to say, while Webb's +7 defensive run saves, or DRS, was the most among NL pitchers. We're also going to get into that a little bit deeper, but for pitchers, there's not a ton of defensive stats to go off of, so defensive runs saved really is kind of the most important one, but he did end up leading the National League in that, so that is very, very interesting. Now we're going to get into a little bit more of the in-depth numbers that kind of show us just how good the Giants have been defensively. Now, my argument here is that the Giants have developed the absolute best defensive battery in all of baseball. And going back to this first graphic, I was going to say that it's hands down. It's pretty obvious that they do. But when you look at the catcher and pitcher finalists here in the National League, all three in both the catcher and all three in both the pitcher, they are all from the same team. So you have a pair of catcher-pitcher from the Cubs, a pair of catcher-pitcher from the Mets, and then, of course, you have Patrick Bailey and Logan Webb from your San Francisco Giants. So, like I said, I was going to put out a tweet and say, I think it's pretty clear the Giants have the best defensive battery in all of baseball, but I looked at those other names and I was like, wait a second, we might have to go look at some numbers, and that's exactly what we're going to do here. So here, we're going to talk about catchers first and see where Patrick Bailey lines up with the other two, and as most of you would probably guess, he is the better defender between Carson Kelly and Luis Torrens. This is Patrick Bailey in terms of all catchers in Major League Baseball, so not just the National League. We're going to look at four columns here that really show just how good Patrick Bailey is. Right smack in the middle, you see a DRS, and at the top there, these aren't necessarily in order, but Patrick Bailey did leave catchers in defensive run saves with 19. On the right-hand side, we're going to look at framing run value, FRM. That is 21. Patrick Bailey led that by a very wide margin. He's the best framer in baseball. A little bit concerning with the ABS coming into play next season, but that's a different conversation we'll have. But he is the best framer in baseball. That is widely known and widely regarded. Then the last two on the right, fielding run value, Patrick Bailey posted 30, and then overall defensive value 35.2, which led all catchers by a very wide margin. And this shows us here that pretty clearly Patrick Bailey is the best defensive catcher in all of baseball. This was already known going into this year. After he won the Gold Glove last year, he was nominated in his rookie year. But this just further proves the point that Patrick Bailey is so far and above the best defensive catcher in baseball, and it really isn't a question. It's really not a fight between him and any other catchers. Alejandro Kirk is usually number 2 in a lot of the stats, but there's still such a wide margin between the two that it proves that Patrick Bailey really is in another world when it comes to defending behind the plate. Now next, we are going to get into this topic that I brought up, is that the Giants have the best defensive battery in baseball. Here, Patrick Bailey by far wins the catcher, but you go down a little bit and you go down to 9 and you see Luis Torrens there, who he has pretty good numbers. 11 defensive runs saved, not Bailey's 19. A 14.1 overall defensive value, still positive. 10 fielding run value, so pretty good defender. No, nothing too crazy there from the Mets guy who played back there for 640 innings. So that one makes a little bit of sense. He had good numbers back there. But the one, I looked at this list and I said, where is Carson Kelly? This is supposed to be, the top 10 defenders in terms of catchers in all of baseball, and Carson Kelly is not up there. So then when we go into just the National League catchers, this is where you see Carson Kelly show up. And to be honest, I'm a little bit surprised that he was even nominated as a Gold Glove finalist, simply just because when you look at these numbers. In terms of defensive runs saved, only 4, which you see there's plenty of guys up ahead of him, obviously Patrick Bailey at the top, but a number of catchers who are better than him in terms of defensive runs saved. Overall, over on the very right-hand side, you see overall defensive value, 8 overall. There's a number of guys who are better than him. Obviously, Patrick Bailey is far and away the best in the National League, but you see, Pedro Pajes with 15. You see Sean Murphy with 11. So that one, a little bit surprising that Carson Kelly was even nominated for this award, when I really do feel like there were some better candidates in the National League that could have been a finalist for the Gold Glove Award, even though Patrick Bailey is a shoo-in to win it. So this closes the conversation on the catcher side of this argument that the Giants have the best defensive battery in baseball. So now let's take a look at the pitcher's side of things. We saw in that tweet from Justice De Los Santos that Logan Webb did lead the National League in defensive runs saved, and that is absolutely true. This is him with the top 5. Obviously, he has 7. Matthew Boyd and David Peterson, who are other finalists, they had 6, and then at 5 you see Colin Ray with 5. Obviously, Logan Webb leads in the most important category when it comes to defensive stats for pitchers. Like I said earlier, there's not a ton of stats you can look at that show whether a pitcher is a good defender, but when you look at defensive runs saved throughout Logan Webb's career, he has taken a big step. He was a -3 defensive runs saved last year, -1 the year before, and then a couple of 1s early in his career. But 7 is a huge outlier for Logan Webb, and it shows that this season he decided to take a lot of pride in his defense. Logan Webb is a guy who decided to start striking out the world this year. He said, you know what, I'm going to start striking guys out, and then ended up leading the National League in strikeouts. So he's a guy where you can tell when he puts his mind on something, when he wants to do something, he's going to achieve it. And it seems like in 2025, Logan Webb took a step forward with his defense and said, I want to become a better defender. I want to field my position good. And that makes a difference. We saw with Orion Kirkring in the NLDS what can happen when a pitcher does not field his position very well. He freaked out and threw the ball past the catcher, should have gone to first, and lost the Phillies that series, unfortunately. So Logan Webb looks like the best defender of these guys. I do want to point out that his 7 defensive runs saved is second in all of baseball. Max Fried was far and away the best with 10, but just 3 behind him was our guy Logan Webb, which led the National League. So I think this proved my point that the Giants absolutely have the best defensive battery in baseball. Patrick Bailey leads all catchers in baseball by a pretty wide margin in terms of defense. Obviously, his bat is a different story, but defensively, Patrick Bailey is the best defensive catcher in all of baseball. Then Logan Webb leading the National League in defensive runs saved with 7, with the other 2 finalists with 6. I know pitchers are just an interesting one when it comes to Gold Gloves. Zach Greinke is a lot, but defensive runs saved is really the number that you look at for the majority of the conversation. Now, the rest of it is going to be up to the voters who they think deserves it, but I do think Logan Webb has a very good shot of winning this award. Obviously, if both of them win the Gold Glove, Patrick Bailey is a shoo-in, and if Logan Webb wins it, then this argument that the Giants have the best defensive battery in baseball is going to be confirmed. I'll be right. But like I said earlier, Patrick Bailey was the best defensive catcher in baseball, and before we close this conversation, I want to point out that Patrick Bailey could definitely win a Platinum Glove this season. This is from Jeff Young on Twitter, a big Giants creator, or whatever you want to call it, on X. He said, "I did not realize that Patrick Bailey led all fielders with 31 fielding run value, but he also led by a comfortable margin." And the numbers speak for it right there. You see, this is for every defender in all of baseball. Right at the top, obviously, Patrick Bailey with 31 fielding run value. And like Justice De Los Santos said, that is the best recorded number in the history of the stat, which is obviously extremely impressive. Then you see Ceddanne Rafaela, Alejandro Kirk, who's another catcher, but still 9 behind Patrick Bailey. You see Pete Crow Armstrong, who is a guy who would probably be in the running for the Platinum Glove as well. And then Bobby Witt Jr. is in there as well. But other names that could be in the conversation for the Platinum Glove in the National League, Brian Hayes had a really good year at third base. He's a pretty well-known, great defender. And then Mason Wynn had a good season defensively. So it will be interesting to see if Patrick Bailey can lock down that Platinum Glove. We haven't seen a Giant win that in a very long time. So that'll be something to follow through the next couple of days, the next few weeks. But let me know down in the comments if you agree with my take that the Giants have the best defensive battery in all of baseball, or tell me if I'm completely crazy, but I don't think I am. We've showed some numbers that back up this conversation pretty easily. Thank you for watching SF Giants Digest, and catch you next time.